6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Gens,
Here.
Nudo,
Here.
Brookhouse.
Here.
Gama,
Here.
Gashke,
Here.
Beardson,
Here.
Kirby. Here. Yig member Charlotte and Yig member Sasha.
Okay. Welcome to day number 2. Thank all staff for all the hard work that you put into this budget. And I thank the supervisors who are here and any citizens who might be here to speak. We're looking forward to a good professional overview of this budget. So with that, we will continue. Circuit Court elected services.
I'll take over there.
70.
78?
Yeah, 77 is the summer.
778.
Good
Did you want to say it?
Supervisor.
Okay, hold on.
So it's my responsibility to report that the Judiciary and Law Committee recommended a increase to the interpreter's expense line item 527230 by 25,000. Okay.
Okay, you're up. Yep.
Thank you. Again, it's my honor and privilege to present the 2025 Circuit Court budget. I bring with me Judge Kirkman. He is the Deputy Chief of District 2. Bethany Loughran, our Financial Services Manager, our Accountant, Shannon Adamczyk, and our Register and Probate, Brian Scheffler. Some of the highlights in the budget presentation are some increases to our contracts, which is our bailiffs. They get a whopping $80 a day currently, and we're requesting a $2 a day increase for them. They get paid by the sessions. So between from the time they arrive till 12 noon and 12 noon till 5 o'clock are considered a session. So a raise from $40 a session to $41. An increase in our payment to our guardian ad litem attorneys of $80 a month, which equates to $66,000 a year, is requested. We have 6.5 of those guardians ad litem, and an increase of $2.50 a session or $5 a day for our part-time court reporter that does our morning calendar over an intake court because it is a high-producing transcript report. Outside of that, we have also asked for a reclassification of 3 deputy court clerk seniors to lead deputy court clerks. Those are for 3 positions throughout my office. As you may have heard me announce in previous meetings or even one-on-ones throughout the course of many years, Circuit Court is very management light. We run the office of 40 with myself, 2 managers, and the Register and Probate, although not within the scope of Register and Probate duties, does take a management supervisory role. We do need that middle level. It would remain an hourly position just to help us with the training aspects, some of the day-to-day issues that might escalate from an individual not knowing a procedure, or just going a little outside the norm factors without having to elevate it to one of us managers. So that's pretty much the highlights on the expense side. On the revenues, I'm going to indicate that I'm concerned on our child support reimbursement. I don't believe there's any way that I'm going to be reaching that revenue item for 2024. In December of last year, we were notified that the feds had changed the allocation and reporting mechanism. So beginning in January, for the first time, we had to submit monthly time reports. The process was last minute with some interpretive parameters. To date of our budgeted $560,000. We've only received $68,000. That's 1/4 of claims. So even if 68,000 times 4 is not going to reach that $560,000, but I do believe the returns will, the payments will increase for the second, third, and fourth quarters, but not to the tune of the $560,000. That is why you'll see a significant decrease in the that particular revenue line item. As you go through the budget, you might see some odd numbers under the revenue for county ordinance fines and motor traffic fines. And that is because there's a split that is done in January between circuit court. We collect the fees, but a portion of those fees do get allocated to the district attorney and the sheriff's department. So that is why those numbers look a little off, and those won't be reflective of your end. And the court support grant is anticipated to remain the same. It could be changed given the governor's budget for the second half of the year, but for the most part, that is anticipated to stay the same. Our interpreter expenses are through the roof. The interpreters across the state of Wisconsin are starting to do collective invoicing. That they are doing minimums, minimum 2 hours. Some do minimum of 4-hour allotments, even if it's for a 15-minute hearing, and charging us for the entire 4 hours. The latest and greatest method that they're doing is they're saying it's a maximum number of cases. So even if the case is going to take 3 minutes, they're only going to do five of those hearings and then charge us for that maximum. Additionally, they're increasing our hourly rate. The number of cases involving interpreters is escalating as well. We do our best to utilize our interpreters efficiently by block scheduling, but there are some times when judges will have to go outside those norms. Jury trials require 2 interpreters so they can tag in and out. So our interpreters are through the roof, and that is why Supervisor Morrissey had indicated that $25,000 increase. Throughout the course of the last 2 weeks, I did a very thorough scrutinization of the budget. I believe that $25,000 can be spread across by decreasing some of the other expenses, with $7,500 being decreased in other professional services, $7,500 in juror fees, and $10,000 in doctor fees. And it's always a wing and a prayer because I don't know how many trials are going to be held next year. I don't know if there'll be an increase in cases needing doctor evaluations and but spreading it out across a couple of those expense items makes it a little more easier to make that modification without increasing the revenue line items. And as a reminder, in other professional services, those are our court commissioners that are per diem, our mediation services, and notaries, our court reporter that I had mentioned earlier, shredding services. Those are kind of our other professional services. So with that, I will take any questions.
Supervisor Gearston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard about a request to increase interpreter expense by 25,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's, I just looked at the account number, but it's in a contractual services appropriation unit, correct?
Yes.
Were we moving money from outside contractual services into, so everything was in contractual? So we really don't need to do this change because she just has authority within that appropriation unit to move the money.
Technically, within the parameters of the appropriation unit language in the budget resolution, she is allowed to move between those.
Yeah, so, I mean, we could, it's just, window dressing though, because the appropriation unit was set as sufficient amount, the 1.543 million, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm okay with doing it, but really it's just window dressing. So, and I yield, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Nudo.
Yeah, one question was also about this $25,000 over for the interpreters. Now, what language do they use it for?
There, we do about 9 or 10 different languages, the primary one being Spanish, but Polish, Italian, Lithuanian, some odd languages too, American Sign Language, Romanian, German, Yes, quiche, which is another dialect and some other dialects. What's the, in Milwaukee? Oh, yes, and Hmong. Thank you.
And, in order to cover this 25,000, I believe you say $7,500, you reduce the other professional services, which that includes body paper, commissioners, or
Yes, and our mediation services. So our per diem court commissioners, they make, I think it's $150 for a session. And their session is divided into a morning court docket and an afternoon court docket. The judges were comfortable at leaving that at the current rate of $176.75 per session. So those fill-in commissioners, so when our full-time commissioners are on vacation or at conferences or are sick, we use those per diem court commissioners. But it's the mediation services. There's not a lot of mediation in our family cases that have been charged for the last couple of years. So that's why we felt like that might be an appropriate place to decrease.
okay, but looking back at 2024, it looks like we're gonna have a projected 131,000 for the line. Now the 2025 is proposed at 106 minus the 7,500, so it's gonna be under 100,000. So we're kind of coming down quite a bit instead of just a move to say, well, to balance the budget, we want to put the $25,000, so we'll take it from some other area. And in order just to balance, but are they true numbers? Because it's already proposed $25,000 less than what we're spending in 2024. And things are going up actually, and now we're reducing another 7,500. And I'm not really sure where the other money came from, just look this down to 75 from there.
Doctor fees 10,000.
Which one?
Doctor Dunn.
Okay,
Juror fees and doctor fees.
so again, so we're reducing that just to make the numbers work. I'm not against raise the $25,000 if it's needed. But I will be against just to reduce the other ones in order to put the 25,000. And my other question is just to go guardian ad litem. How much do they get do they get paid per hour or per case, or how do they get paid?
They get paid monthly. It's a monthly stipend. For a full contract, we have 6 full contracts and 1 half contract. We're asking for the contract to be increased at the $80 a month to $66,000 a year. They submit monthly time reports and invoices to us so that we can collect those monies from non-indigent litigants. And we bill the litigants at $100 an hour. They are not being reimbursed at that $100 an hour. It helps to cover, they don't have to do all the additional overhead copies. They get a little more priority in terms of scheduling and working around on that. And they don't have to do any of the collection activities either. So they're not making the $100 an hour if we were not to contract with them at this rate.
Okay. So how should we do it? Again, should we amend that in order to get the $25,000? But I want to keep the same. I do not want to reduce the other ones.
Supervisor Nudo, we were just told by finance that they can move it around in the appropriations line, so she is gonna be responsible for coming up with the numbers in her budget. So we don't have to make an amendment. It's all under the same appropriation line. So we don't have to take out of this and move it there. You know, I mean, it's her discretion, it's her budget, it's her line. She can move, if they think they need interpreter money, you know, and I do commend you for not trying to just jack up revenue or something like that, which is a bad budget practice. So that's, I mean, we could just leave it alone and it'll work itself out.
And then, we just leave it alone, but it's not gonna matter, you know, if that's the case, because she can do it under, own opinion, or whatever you wanna call discretion. So we don't have to do it, but I don't like it, because in this way, it looks like we're taking it out from one to put it to the other one to make the numbers work. That's what it sounds like.
Right, and my response to that would be if other professional services needs the 106,000. If she wants that to happen, she'll take the 7 from one of the other funds. So, I mean, it's all within her
I
purview to,
understand, but
okay,
the way it looks, that's my feeling.
okay.
I would just leave it as it is then.
Supervisor Gearson,
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the budget as presented by the county executive. Approval of
it's been moved, God bless you. It's been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Nudo.
and then if I could have the floor.
You can have the floor,
Thank you.
Supervisor Gearston.
I see the total contractual appropriation unit, which is the budget we're approving. These other items are cost accounting. Went from 1.5 million to 1.543 million. So through the chair to the budget director, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we did have an increase there. And the department can come to you and move money within during the year as the cost accounting is needed for interpretation fees or any of these items. So
That's correct.
they can work with you during the year to get everything done within this 1.5 million. So
Okay.
with that, I yield. Thank you.
Supervisor Kirby,
So, through the chair, what do you think would be a more realistic child support revenue number? As Supervisor Gantz already mentioned, inflating a revenue number just so we can make budget is not a good practice. So I'd be interested to hear what you think is a more realistic number.
It is a shot in the dark. The 420 is high. I wish I had another quarter of receipts from child support to garner with.
Okay.
And I've been doing budget presentations for 22 years. Barna has yet to mislead me. I can't emphasize that enough, that if he thought that this was completely out of line, I think we would have been having different conversations. I am skeptical.
Okay.
All I can do is continue to update. I've been reassured by both Barna and Patty that it falls into this big pool, and somehow if I fall short on this, that it's not going to, there's revenue fees that are offset by expenses. And so one kind of plays into the other, that in the grand scheme of things, I looked at my last 10 years of budgets. We've met budget for the last 10 years with a little to give back. Judge Schrader had the great motto of it'll all work out. I've said it many times, I'm on a wing and a prayer when it comes to some of these. These are discretionary expenses, and some of the revenues are discretionary as well too. So Bethany is awesome in keeping us up to date, managing the expenses. Our judges are very responsive to my comments and indications about our interpreters and using efficient use. In Kenosha, we have an efficient use of our jury service. 95% of our trials begin on a Monday, so that the jurors don't have to come back on additional days. We have many cost-saving mechanisms built in that it does work out in the end. So it's why I'm probably not barking too much about that 420, is that I'm hopeful that we fine tune the submissions for the child support funding. And next year, the other counties, we're on an odd year cycle of our 2-year cooperative agreement with them. Other counties across the state will start that next year. And I'm sure as that noise ticks off, that there might be adjustments moving forward. So, yeah.
That might be a question then more for Barna. So do you feel comfortable with that number, or that if we don't hit that number, other revenue sources will?
That's why that number, that's where it is, because I feel
Okay. That's good to know.
Supervisor, are you through? Supervisor Kirby?
Mhm.
Supervisor Gama?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the line that says, motor traffic fines, for the 2025 proposed, we're looking at 120,000. So does that mean that for 2025, overall, we're predicting it's gonna be $120,000 worth of motor traffic fines?
Collections. So we collect full debt too, because not everybody pays their fines on time.
Okay.
So it's not that the sheriff is writing that much, but theoretically it could. I've never added up the amount of citations issued in a year.
Okay,
This is the collections on past due, current,
I see. Gotcha.
and then the county ordinance, that's for the traffic, and then the county ordinances for all the ordinances, loitering, littering, underage drinking, those things.
Gotcha.
And again, those are breakdowns between us, the DA and the sheriff's department.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Supervisor Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question on that, Rebecca, for line item 445060. You had said earlier that revenue line has different places where that's up. Where are the areas that they end up, who gets?
So on the motor traffic fines, that is 60% to my office, 20% to the DA for the cost of prosecution, and 20% to the sheriff for writing the tickets. And then on the county ordinances, it is a little different. It goes 15%, 30% to circuit court, 15% to the DA, and 55% to the sheriff. There tends to be a little more investigation needed on them for the ordinances.
Very well, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I think the presenter is just maybe making note of the revenue issue, and I spoke with Barna about this, and he's comfortable that that's a number that will be able to work. I don't think he'd present us with something that was way off like that, because I had that circled and highlighted, and I was gonna bring that up as well, so. I also see a drop of over 100,000 in medical insurance. I suppose that's different people taking different plans, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay, and in salaries, that's the step increases. Okay.
And the 3 reclasses.
Yes.
Okay. How much of that is the increases, do you know?
$6,007.
Okay, all right. All right, that concludes my questions. Any other questions or comments? It's been moved and seconded, I think. Yes. No further questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So thank you.
Thank you. I also have the elective services budget. It's 301.
That's 301.
So, the elected services office is located out at the county center. It houses my office of treasurer, the county clerk, and the register of deeds, and it's to provide services to the west end of the county. There's one person that staffs it, and it's supplemented by a 0.55 half-time position. That half-time position floats among the 4 offices on a downtown campus to get our needs met during vacations, job priorities, certain projects, and covers during the month of July for tax time, in addition to vacations and leaves of absence of the full-time person out there, so that we try to staff that office to its maximum capability. The hours are 8 to 5. They do close over the noon hour. So the budget is straightforward. There's no additions except for the little step increases on the salary portion. And there is a slight decrease on the medical insurance.
Supervisor Kirby,
Move to approve, budget is presented.
it's been moved by Supervisor Kirby. Second. Seconded by Supervisor Noodle. Anybody have any questions or comments? Pardon?
John Collins.
Go ahead.
So Becky, this responsibility for the office is rotated between Register of Deeds, Circuit Court.
Yes, I'm boss of the year for 2025.
That is why she's presenting.
Yes. It's being handed over from Joellen, and then it's me, and then I think the county clerk, and then Terry.
Did you make up boss of the year? Or is that a real title?
This predates me that I have to.
We made it up.
All right, okay.
And what was funny is that we're all women and teasingly refer to it as the boy, so you know.
Okay, I have one. How much, what is the utilization out there? Just because I want to know.
It's fairly busy.
Okay,
The last time I was in the rotation, we did I tried to do a time study, but it was right before COVID, and COVID kind of weirded it out there. But you'd be surprised during tax time, Terry, you could probably attest to the amount of money that they do. It's
Good.
Register of Deeds does significant work,
They
the
do a
county
lot of marriage
clerk,
licenses.
marriage licenses.
oh boy.
Yeah. They can't do passports out there, but they can do the marriage licenses.
Right.
That's
Oh.
just because you can't issue a passport out of the same office that issues a birth certificate, because that would
Mhm.
potentially promote, I do fraud, so.
Okay. Well, I was just curious, because I didn't need statistics or anything. I just wanted to know just a feel for how much, because I've listened to this for 17 years and I've never asked. And now it piqued my curiosity, so, all
Is,
right,
is it busy all the time? No,
Well, no.
but then they have other projects, they
Sure,
can do
sure.
receiving and, so it's a valuable service that we provide to the West End individuals. And the reason that I can attest to is because when we're closed, we do hear about it. If we close for an immediate illness or,
okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
You can get your marriage license out there.
Settle down over there.
He's getting sassy.
Yeah. Settle down, Spanky. Okay, treasurer,
All right, next up. So I think as you look at the budget, the expenditure side has pretty stable
we've looked at the budget.
year to year. Oh, sorry.
288.
Probably the things that will catch your eye is the changes in the revenue side of things. As we've talked about before, Barna, Patty and I have been meeting pretty regularly with our investment people to try to lock in as much as we could at the higher rates before interest started going down, and Barna has been poring over those numbers, coming up with what he thinks we're gonna get on the general fund interest on investment. The interest and penalty on delinquent taxes, you might be thinking to yourself, why is that going down? Well, we need to start ratcheting that down some, because if you noticed over the months, as I give you that delinquent tax report, we simply have less delinquent taxes than we used to have. This year's amount that we issued in certificates was 20% less than what we issued 2 years ago. So we just are keeping rolling and going down in delinquent taxes. So that revenue has to ratchet down. The only thing that I think is a little error that we might want to correct, Barna, is this increase on the forest crop line to $2,000. Unless you've got some inside information that we're doubling the amount of managed forest land in the county, I think we might want to just put that little
Can
$900.
somebody
back down.
explain to me what
What the heck that is?
crop line is?
So, when you enroll in like a managed forest program in the state of Wisconsin, instead of paying property taxes, you pay a managed forest fee. And that fee gets split between us and, and the municipality. And, so I don't think we planted twice as many trees as we currently have in Kenosha County. So I think that was just an error on that one, going from 1,100 to 2,000, but.
Actually,
It went down
The
from
budget.
4,000 to
Oh,
2,000.
oh,
took it from
yeah.
4 to 2.
That is probably accurate, yeah. from what I said. I said 1,100, you brought it up to 2,000, so I was like, I still don't think we're gonna get 2,000. I think 1,100 is probably about accurate, but that's about the big thing there. Otherwise, the egg use conversion fee, that's another one that's like shooting at in a barrel. Because it's trying to anticipate how many acres we're gonna convert out of agricultural use into some other thing. So it's trying to use a crystal ball to guess at that. So we're coming somewhere in the middle of where we were and where I think we're gonna be this year and going there. So that's where we're at. Those are the big things. Questions?
Supervisor Nudo?
Well, I can appreciate your comment that we might not reach the $2,000. However, I don't think we should make a big deal for that.
Yeah, like I said, it's $900. Do what you will.
Mhm.
Can live with the 900?
Yeah,
All right.
if that, we'll take it out of, sometimes maybe.
I-
We'll decide, we'll
okay.
decide we'll work with that. With that combination.
It's been moved by Supervisor Nudo, seconded by Supervisor Gearston to approve. Supervisor Gama, you have your hand up?
Thank you. So I was looking at the, overtime section. 22,000 was inspired me to look at overtime going back to, at least
For a while.
for a handful of years. And I was wondering, over the years, why is overtime those numbers?
We have a very small office with a lot of state mandated budget,
Okay.
like deadlines that we have to meet. It used to be less. We got a half-time position, cut out of our office some years ago. And since then, it's been what it is. Finance has been monitoring it to see if it makes more sense to hire a part-time person back or if we're better off paying the overtime. And so far, I think we're skating on the better off with the overtime side of that line. So.
Yeah, so I was looking at the years, 2017 through, 2019, and it was a pretty large
Pretty high.
number of overtime.
Yep.
Was there
we had a
anything
lot.
particular going on in those years?
We had a lot of turnover in the office.
Okay.
So then when you have a lot of turnover on top of that,
Yeah,
this year, it's been a little higher than I would like it to be because we've had, remember in the last presentation, how she said that we have this part-time floater position that then covers when 45 and 50 is out. Well, for the last 3 months, that part-time floater position has been out at 45 and 50 full-time. So we haven't had any use of that position for the last few months. So
I have more questions.
Pardon me?
I have more questions. That's
Yeah,
okay.
keep going.
So,
You have the floor.
during those years, 17 through, what was that, 19, even going to 2020, I see there's a temporary salary section. I'm guessing you hired extra help for
Yep.
those years?
Yep, we
Okay.
did. And we had a ton of tax deed work to do those years. That's primarily what it was, is what we were doing with those.
So
And
then,
then we got rid of the temp budget and
Yeah.
now we're here with the overtime that we have left.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep.
and then after, looks like after 2020, from 21 to going into, next year, that temporary salary section is gone. Does that mean you're all caught up with what you needed to do?
Yeah, that project is done. Could we always use more help? Yes, but is that, I've been here 22 years and Barna has never given me a budget memo that says, Terry, feel free to ask for whatever you would like.
Okay.
So, you know, we're doing better now. We got caught up on that. We were able to, use IT to try to, get some of that automated. We're still working on updating that because we've had law changes again. So that's in the IT budget actually to update that delinquent tax management program we created.
Then I think if
Yep.
this trend continues for the next handful of years, we have to address it. Okay. All right.
Every year, it's a discussion point on whether or not we're on this side of the line or
Yeah.
that side of the line
Gotcha.
for it. So,
Okay, that answers all of my questions. Thank you for your explanation. Thank you for
No
the
problem.
finance team for the numbers, and thank you to Supervisor Kirby for checking my numbers. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Yes, 2017 to 2019, we had a huge backlog of tax deed property that we had to push through. And we were automated, we created a task
Whole
force to
program,
get it
yeah,
done. I mean,
yeah.
it was
it was a
literally,
lot.
we had a lot of work to do in those years to get, and they're finally caught up now. So that's what happened in those
Gotcha.
years. So,
Okay,
um,
We had, from the 2008 housing crisis, We more than doubled the amount of delinquent taxes we had in 1 year.
Right.
And then that again doubled again the next year. And so, yeah, it built up a lot.
Pretty busy, huh?
Yeah, it was less than fun. I was a little afraid when COVID happened that we were going to see something like that, and which is why I worked really closely with the Secretary of State and the State Treasurer to create to get some of the ARPA fund to actually pay people's delinquent taxes so we wouldn't see that increase again. And in Kenosha County, we actually were able to get almost $3 million and saved about 280 families' homes from foreclosure from that money. So we could have been in that position again, but luckily we got some money to help us out this time, so that was good.
Okay, before the vote, I want to go back to the general fund interest and have, Barna, can you explain that again?
So
Just dive into that.
So the general fund interest line, so that's the portion that's that interest that we receive from the managed funds when we have our finance committee meetings and I go to where we are. Like Terry said, we meet with those professionals regularly and they advise us on what sort of investment instruments that they use. And we've been in a good cycle from the standpoint that we are cycling through a lot of the lower interest items and we were able to upgrade those to these higher interest ones. So we're in a really good position to close out this year and for next year.
And we increased a little bit more what we were keeping in there. So
Because we've been getting little pockets of extra money like.
on safer.
They call it
Opioid.
opioid funds and that sort of.
If I could add to it, I will say, we took the lion's share of ARPA funds and invested them. But those are the lower interest rates, because when we first invested those were at like 0.5%, even in Dana Investments. But now those have rolled out and we're getting, on some of them, 6, almost 7%. So we're locking, now that interest rates, so we would say, is it time to lock things in? And the investment guy would say, the Fed is not signaling, everyone's talking about it, but the Fed is not signaling that they're going to lower interest rates, let's ride it out. And he was right, it went almost a whole year of the Fed never cut the interest rates. But then when they really started to cut, now he's putting this into longer.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Supervisor Nerdigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Jerry, when the municipality does a reassessment, such as Kenosha or Twin Lakes, how does that affect the cost in your department?
Not really. People think it does, other than the fact that I get a lot more phone calls. And because as you can imagine, as soon as somebody sees that reassessment notice saying that their assessed value has increased 60%, they start to lose their mind and they think their tax bill is going to increase 60%.
You just put them to the municipality.
Sometimes the easy questions we try to take, but when they go too deep into what their house is worth, obviously I'm not an assessor, so.
There's no inputting of that. All that information comes to the assessment company.
Yeah, they go from the assessor's office into the land information office, but
Yeah.
you'll probably see Scott later tonight. But so they upload and we balance those rolls with them. But whether or not it goes up nothing or 100%, it really doesn't matter. We got to do the same amount of work to balance the rolls.
So there's no extra cost,
No.
except for maybe a few phone calls.
Just some extra angry phone calls. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, sure.
Sure. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public Works. What you starting with, Chris, so I can? Facilities?
We'll start with the kind of overall summary. There's packets at each one of your tables. We'll kind of start with there and then it'll go UW extension, planning, facilities, golf parks, highway.
Fine.
Pretty thick packet.
All right. So, the public works, since we have 5 rather big divisions, we like to always put together a packet to make it hopefully a little bit easier to follow, present, and give kind of a good picture of what the budget is. So the first couple of pages are kind of the top, a very high level, compared to the other, to the county as a whole, and then we'll get into each individual department with a little bit more specifics, but still kind of at a high level. So this first page, of the packet is just showing 24 to 25 and how the levy, change. There's actually a reduction in levy, which we'll get to obviously a little further. And then the expense totals, that have changed to go along with it, which we'll also go into in a little bit here. Dropping down into the next box, we have operating expenses. I like the year-to-year comparison. It shows, we're at almost 10.5 for 24 and slightly less, 10.5 for 25, in comparison to what Public Works is to the county as a whole. The line over to the right, we'll jump to the right, is the levy. Again, we're typically at around 11 to 10%. You can see a small reduction in going from 24 to 25. And then the bonding. A lot of not everybody, the majority was present for that CIP meeting earlier in September. The reason that Public Works gives that presentation is because we maintain 80 to 85% of all the capital projects that happen. And then there isn't any ARPA funding for 2025. The hope is that that all runs out and is spent by 24. But we left it on here for comparison so you can see some of the things that ARPA has touched between 23 and 24. The last being some of the highway infrastructure for this current year. And then jumping down to the bottom, within Public Works specifically, there isn't a full-time equivalent change. However, it had been proposed half position, which is a half because it'll be hired mid-year and then roll over and be a full position for 26 if approved, of a GIS specialist, which is actually be in addition to the IT department, specifically land info, but will be housed and designated and funded by Public Works. I'll let Shelley speak to that in more detail in a second, but what this essentially does, this person will be creating a whole bunch of databases that are interfaces for both internal use and external use, and makes efficiencies a whole lot better. We actually had a staff meeting a few weeks ago, trying to feel out where people are having some hardships, what things could be improved, just get the general gist of things. And one of the things that was talked about was when they get a phone call and they don't know exactly who to direct them to or what the information may be, and then they're trying to figure it out and they're on hold and all this. Well, this position actually can help with that by having this database created where they can easily access it. This information is more readily available. And it's good knowing that without even having that conversation with our team, this position was already being presented. It may help one of those problems that the team kind of runs into. As for the funding, it is split up amongst the 4 major divisions: highways, parks, golf, and facilities. Because it'll help each one of those with different applications or uses that it may use. The benefit to having golf, obviously, is golf is served out of revenues and not levies, so this will be partially offset with some revenues created from Public Works. And then I'll kind of let Shelley speak to a little bit more specifics of what this position will entail.
Good evening. So I developed some top 10 items of what a GIS specialist, what we're anticipating the GIS specialist would do. They would help us with our data management and analysis. They would manage and analyze our spatial data that we collect throughout the year. Improve planning and development, which would provide visual data for not only our planning, but all of our divisions within Public Works. Enhanced communication, this would be to be able to communicate some of our projects would be map driven. So that people that are more visual in nature and can be posted on our website to help with that communication aspect. Resource allocation, so they can optimize our allocation of resources. Maintenance and asset management, which would basically creating an inventory of all our assets within our parks department, our golf department, our highways. DPW emergency response planning would help us identify vulnerable areas, such as maybe where we have flooding in a roadway. When we do have those storms, they know exactly where to go. We have those mapped out. Environmental impact assessment, basically, we can overlay environmentally impacted properties onto an area map. And if we are doing road work in the vicinity and we come across something, we kind of know that what is there and we know who to contact. Public engagement and transparency. It's got accessible mapping tools and data we're hoping to get out on our website so people can easily click into projects that might be impacting their project or in their area. Interdepartmental collaboration is just basically sharing our data with other departments and other divisions. Parks and highways go together, planning and parks go together. And then cost savings, which is basically over time, that strategic use of all that data will have some cost savings in our planning and engineering and analysis. So that just kind of gives you the top 10. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
You think you're gonna find one person to do all that?
It's gonna take some time.
Oh,
So, yeah, I'll pause here in case there's any questions. We do have, Scott and Mike here in case there's any questions that came up about it. So hopefully Public Works and IT can kind of answer collaboratively. And if not, I'll just keep going, so.
Supervisor Kirby.
So I do have one question. Don't we already have an asset management system where we keep track of all the county's assets?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So would this be just utilizing that system then, or?
There's other assets in the term of, you have fixed assets, which is what we do have a system for that manages all that. But
Uh-huh.
then you also have assets like culverts underneath the roads that we don't specifically identify each set of those, so they would
Okay.
have this in their system. If one gets replaced, we now have it, because those are operational replacements as opposed to capital replacements. So things along that nature.
Okay, so that would include assets beyond just the fixed assets. Okay.
Continue.
And then we do have some proposed reclassifications within the division, so we'll talk about that when we get. So we flip over to page 2. This is a little bit more in-depth where you can see what specific changes between each division and then each expense line associated with it. I put down at the bottom, we'll get to it when we get to planning and development, but there is 0.1% of this increase is actually a levy transfer. There was a lease agreement that was previously held in health that now with that sanitarian move over to planning and development last year, we're simply moving those funds from health into our division. If you don't account for that, that becomes a reduction of 0.6%, which I don't know, in my 8 years here, I've seen Public Works come forward with a reduction. And of our expenses that did go up, 98% of it was personnel. So we do have a rather thin budget, and as I kind of told Public Works, we could end the meeting right there, but to keep everybody's night fulfilled, we'll just keep going.
Yeah, don't try to slack off.
So we'll flip over to page 3. This is now getting into the division level. This is UW extension. At the top, we'll start with personnel. There is a slight increase. What this is a part-time position that helps maintain the garden, the arboretum, and the walking path area that has been recently redone. And we also have a few studies going out with some of the trees and different things like that. This person does help facilities as well, so it is kind of a benefit to both maintaining the facilities and then a part-time of UW extension. Jumping down to the contracted services area. Almost all of this is the other professional services, which is, you flip the page. That 99% constitutes this UW 136 agreement. These are all the positions that, Kenosha County has an agreement with the extension. All of them are currently filled except for the health and well-being educator, which ironically is changing in 25 to a financial security educator, which being in finance, I think is a great move. In schools, I think they should teach a lot of that. So here we go with UW extension having that. It did come up in our meeting where they had asked what costs the county shares with UW Extension with this. I spoke with Pam, who's, out of town tonight. She couldn't be here. But it's roughly about a 50-50. So we get all these service for about half the cost. It could be a little more, it could be a little less. It fluctuates on the, professor salaries. I did go into it and ask them what the minimum of the salaries was. It was around 57,000 if you add in their benefits. The lowest it comes out to is like a 55-45 split. So realistically getting very good services at about half the cost. If you'll notice, the total here is $600 less if you flip back to page 3 than what that total is there. That is for an end of year report that UW Extension puts together. They have a outside party to do that, and I believe that they plan on sharing that going forward in some of the community meetings. If you can see what they're paying for and what they do throughout the year. Beyond that, dropping down to supplies, very slight increases, mainly in the mileage travel. That goes along with some of the professors and programs that are running, and then a slight decrease in the public liability. UW Extension does have 3 separate kind of subdivisions. If you flip over to page 5, the bigger program and an after-school program, these are all revenue neutral. They have to earn the revenue in order to have an expense. So we touch on it, but we don't ever really go into too much detail simply because they have to earn what they spend. And that is UW Extension. If there's any questions.
Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the UW Extension budget.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Gay. Questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Go ahead.
So the Planning, Development and Extension Education Committee approved a increase to land use, approved a recommendation to the Finance Committee regarding land use fees revenue increase with line 442-250 account number for $10,000.
Stole my thunder.
Sorry.
So yes, that was a recommendation coming out of PDEC. I'll jump into the regular spiel then. We'll start at personnel again. I do have some notes that I'll kind of read off of. Personnel, the increases are based on the annual salaries that you see for the 3% per year. The contracted services are slightly down. This will get a little confusing, so I'll do my best to try and explain as clearly as I can. Contracted services, we tried to split out to make it easier to read between what has always been planning and development operations versus what has changed because of building inspection processes that are new between 23 and 24. So the increase that you see of the 215,000 inspection services is netted by the 40, the 55, and the 120 in revenue below it. What that is the Salem Lakes building permits and inspections that were approved last year, I think around June. There was a $95,000 contract, which is that 40 and 55. And then the additional is realistically money in and money out for fees that come in, and then what the county does and distributes them back out. If you're looking in your budget book, you're probably seeing much higher numbers than this 195. That's simply because when the budget was put together, we're trying to estimate what effect Salem Lakes would have on the revenue and therefore the expenses. It was a little low. Once we get a full year of 2024 in 25, when we're presenting 26's budget, it should reflect accordingly. As I kind of spoke with the fixed changes, most of that is levy neutral coming from health for that vehicle lease. And then there's been a decrease in public liability insurance. Other than that, I think I've explained kind of how the revenue has changed, so I'll stop here in case there's any questions.
Any questions from the committee?
And
It's been moved, you're through with this. Second,
Well, there's, if we're gonna approve the budget, we still have the capital as well. There's also some very minor subdivisions on page 8. Again, it's very levy neutral. Money has to come in order for it to be spent. However, we will notate on page 7, throughout the whole meeting, I'll just kind of notate what changes have happened to the capital since that last meeting. There hasn't been any for planning and development, but the 50,000 is for one of the vehicles that has broke. The other vehicles they have are 20 years old and this would replace it. And comment on the 26th one, in 26, that lease will end. And we would rather purchase than release again. So that is why you see the 26 budget as well. So with that, that's the whole planning and development.
I would second Sarah's motion.
it's been moved by Supervisor Kirby, seconded by Supervisor Kirsten. Any questions or comments, Supervisor Kirsten?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think the motion was to approve as presented by the county executive without the $10,000 change. And,
No amendment was made.
right,
yes.
right. And I do support that. I did second it. We did make that change in committee, but we also see, if you look at the budget resolution language, instead of looking at it in a microcosm, the administration is presenting policy for us to consider that we will mandate a periodic reviews of all of these types of fees on a properly cyclical manner. So we don't have to do it on a one-off committee by committee. So I think that's actually a better policy. Now, we will consider that policy, haven't approved it, but I think that's a better way of handling it. So that's why I support adopting the budget as is without the $10,000 change.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That second passes. Okay,
We're on the facilities. That's page 9 in the packet, or 127, starting in the budget book. I'll start off with, this division does have a proposed reclassification. That's of the project manager, currently at an E9, reclassing to a project engineer at E11. What that is the project manager who oversees a lot of the bigger projects that are happening within Public Works, currently on the ceremonial courtroom, the human services building, and things of that nature. This would put him where we believe should be within the wage scale and confirmed by HR. So we'll keep moving on to the salaries, the personnel. This has increased both because of the annual increases as well as the medical insurance. That's simply just because of personal selections and how the county allocates amongst each division. As you can see, that's roughly 200 grand of the 464 that we had kind of spoke about earlier, mainly being in personnel. There's also the miscellaneous contractual services. This is just increased simply based on the department needs. A lot of those services in here include utilities and contract services, things of that nature. And then the building insurance has increased just simply because of the supplier code. Dropping down to the revenue, we have decreased both the parking structure and the jail and traffic fine income based on historical data that we're seeing and reduced usage. And then our safety building rental income with the PSB, we typically have around 3% increase, and that's no different this year. So we'll actually on page 10, if you flip over, I know in the budget books, facility is one of the harder divisions to kind of group together. So we always throw together this page 10 so you can see line by line and compare each of the 3 divisions. Facilities is made up of the Civic Center, which is pretty much everything except the PSB and Human Services, which is the job center. And I'll pause there before we kind of roll into the capital portion of it, in case there's any questions on operations.
Supervisor Gaske.
So just to clarify on that reclassification of the project manager, is that Frank Martinelli's position?
Correct.
Okay, so to further clarify, 2 years ago, he was at an E11 and was bumped down to an E9, and now we're bringing him back to where he was 2 years ago.
I don't think he was at an E11. Since then, we've had the comp study, which kind of changed some of where the categories were. I believe he might have been at a E10 and bumped down to an E9, and now is being presented at an E11.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Kirby.
So what kind of expenses do we go through, like miscellaneous contractual services and just in general?
So mainly you're seeing like the contracted services, so elevator maintenance contracts, things of that nature of maintaining a building
Okay. Just maintenance contracts, basically.
primarily.
Okay.
For facility, yes.
Any other questions or comments? I would just say that Frank does a great job and he should have been moved up 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion, but we'll leave it at that. With this facilities division page 10. Is there a way next year when you do this that you could put what it is in this budget? You know, for this year, the previous year's budget,
Yeah, we could.
so that since you're making me look at this extra page and not my budget book, I could actually see what it was and compare it to what it's gonna be.
Certainly do that.
Thank you.
It'll make the font a little smaller, so I can't hear any complaints there.
I know I'm getting older, but I'll figure the font out. You just put it in here.
I'll get it.
All right.
There's
So
no,
does that conclude that, or are we keep?
well, I'll flip over to the CIP portion of facilities. So as I said before, I'm just gonna notate things that have changed since when you guys last saw it, otherwise we'll be here all night. On this specific page, it's only the KCC office renovation. What you saw before was 750 and 750. After speaking with Frank and some of the consultants on where we could realistically see money actually spent, we adjusted this to 600 and 900. We do have just under $1 million already previously budgeted for this project. So these additional funds is what we could realistically see to spend in 2025. And I'll pause there again in case there's any questions that we want to answer or look it over.
Any questions on that?
We'll go to page 12. This is a package, a page here, working with Matt Strino. He has a whole bunch of different spreadsheets that has all this information. And we work to kind of just get a summarized version to show you guys that we do have a plan. We always speak of, we have a plan for the roof, we have a plan for the hardscapes, HVAC, all of that. This does kind of lay it out for you guys as well to see it. Showing the last time that it was installed or replaced, and then when we would expect it to become due to be replaced and what budgets that you may see over them. This is nothing more than just kind of informational to show you guys some of the things that are working on in facilities.
This is a great page.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows me that we kind of know what we're doing. It's good. I like it.
So we'll flip over to page 13. The only things that have changed here is there was an addition to the safety building, this elevator hydraulic cylinder replacement. It's kind of to your point, what's in that contractual services during an annual inspection. One of the cylinders actually blew, and luckily for us, at the cost that this would take, we're able to adjust the CIP to account for it rather than trying to push off other projects or different things to account for it because the elevator is currently down. It going out does kind of raise some concern of what is the life of the other elevators, which we will be kind of looking into in 25 to hopefully avoid this going forward. But that is new to this budget, as well as an adjustment to the air handling units and controls for the PSB. that previously was 625. That has gone up based on just, recent conversations with the consultant. I am definitely no HVAC expert, but there's a refrigerant change that is happening. It's kind of put a stall at moving these projects going forward, but also likely comes with an increased expense. So you'll see this notated here. And that's why. Other than that, there wasn't no changes to the CIP. And before we go for comment, we will flip to the next page. This is the energy efficiency project. This is one of the capital projects that you guys vote on. We kind of lay it out just to show again that there is a plan that uses these funds for the energy efficiency. At the top, it shows what we've actually spent and then what the average is, and beneath shows some of the projects that were completed and some of the projects yet to complete. In our committee, it was asked some of the return on investment here, which we have 22 and 23 and 24. At our next public works meeting, we plan to have some more historical data to add to it. But combining, there's two ways that we get money back on this. We actually get a physical check that we reinvest back into the projects. And then there's the estimated savings based on utility. So from 22 to 24, we've seen just under $40,000 physically come back and just over $50,000 in estimated savings, coming up to just around $92,000. So just to show that these projects aren't just smoke of energy reduction and savings there, it is real. And that is all for facilities.
Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the facilities budget as presented by the county executive.
It's been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Kirby. Any further questions or comments on that piece of the budget? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
We're now on page 15 for the golf division, or as I like to call it, the golden child of public works.
The golden child. Did you say the golden child?
At least for now.
In my 40 years, that's new. I don't remember.
I see the golden child started.
Laura.
That's not.
She's in my, oh darn, she missed it. I don't remember it being called the golden child.
No, it's a recent change.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. It's recent.
Used to be the redheaded stepchild.
Used to be the what?
Redheaded stepchild.
The redheaded stepchild.
Yeah, that's what I was, a red golf course that Supervisor Rhodes was trying to get rid of 12 years ago.
That one's all gonna be updated.
I know. I digress.
Yeah.
Continue.
Right, so-
There is a decent amount of personnel changes that you see in this division. It's two-part. There has been a change federally in regards to the minimum salary requirement, and a lot of these positions had been exempt. We did an analysis to decide between exempt and non-exempt and what benefits for both the county and the employee to see what the best step would be going forward. And this is what we have proposed. This also goes hand in hand with Jim Wallace taking over just a year ago for the golf division, and where he kind of wants to see his department in the hierarchy move going forward. So I read it in Public Works. It's a lot to read of titles. But I'll just kind of pause here in case there's any questions that you guys have about any of these positions and titles.
Any questions? Well, continue.
We'll keep going. The salaries increased again, the annual raises as well as temporary salaries. I should back up. We always budget golf a little conservatively. We know, you can see at the bottom where we put what the actual revenues received for each year are. 21, 4.4, 4.4, 5, and then we're projected again at 5 this year. We budget conservatively because we don't ever know when golf may start to kind of decline. So we budget at the expense level rather than the revenue level. So with that though, salaries temporary. With the increased play, we need increased, individuals to be able to maintain that play. And that's what you see there. Along with increased play comes extra credit card fees and data processing. The contracted services, this is kind of the fertilizer, or I'm sorry, the supplies is kind of the fertilizer that's increased based on the forest needs and historical data. The contracted services as well, it kind of goes along with some of those maintenance contracts and things like that that have also increased just in order to maintain the course and keep the high level of quality of play that we have. And then the revenue, we've been recently showing here this $300,000 increase, or profit, I should say. And that is to offset some of the capital expenditures, specifically the golf course improvement plan. They recently renovated the 9, the driving range, the practice area, and going forward, we have down the pipe, storage buildings and a maintenance building, Brightendale and pets, and then renovations of the blue course as well. Before we get into too much capital, I'll pause here in case there's any questions for golf operations.
Supervisor Gama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, out of curiosity, do we have any like demographic data about who uses our golf courses? Like if they're from Kenosha County or a different county?
There is a good portion out of state. I'll let you kind of.
Yeah, so there was a study done in, I believe, 2012 where they did, and we talked about doing another zip code now with our customer base. But I think the study they did in the past still holds pretty true. So Petrifying Springs, predominant local play. At Brightendale is where we see a big variance in the amount of zip codes where our customer base is going to come. Actually, that location, like, a lot of folks are also into this play because in general, golf is a little bit cheaper than golf. It's an indoor district golf course. And though they have other options, the quality of our golf course keeps leading to Brightendale. And with 45 holes, we have 3-person tees, so people got 100 tees, and usually 5 slot feeds the size of our facility. So we've been able to use that and take advantage. So actually, a lot more variance in demographic at Brightendale and Petrifying Springs.
And how about data regarding how we're doing compared to other counties in Wisconsin?
So Washington County does pretty well. I would say our revenues are probably greater because we have more facilities. But Fond du Lac County does really well. Washington County does really well. So Wisconsin is pretty unique nationwide in that there is a strong group of county-owned golf courses. It's honestly it's not really a thing in Indiana where I came from. You don't see that. A lot more city, same with Illinois, but they're funded differently with mandatory parks revenue. But Wisconsin has actually a great group of county golf. I would say that the 3 biggest ones I can think of are Brown County, Washington County.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Any other questions here? What about interdepartmental personnel changes? What's that?
Where you're looking.
I'm looking back to my budget book, line 519,990. I'm on page 113 of the budget book.
Yeah, so I know what they are, but I just want to see the number so we can talk specifically. They're talking about the 123,013.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so this was actually, they've always had somewhat of a budget in there. You can see 2023's actual being 54, just under 55,000. How that is the finance has obviously employees that are spread out throughout each department. Originally, this was just one person that was split between parks and golf. Payroll specialist that handles all of the AP, hiring, different things like that. In 2024, in efforts to both reduce levy and get kind of a more realistic approach, I changed some of that breakout to where some of not only just that one individuals, but also everybody else in finance that works with golf, mine, the fiscal manager, and things to that nature were spread out amongst other various divisions. The benefit being the ones that hit golf are now offset by levy, and it had like a $75,000 levy savings reduction, so call it.
Okay,
So that's what that is.
all right, I like that. Miscellaneous contractual services, are we contracting there 203 from 185?
This is, it's a whole conglomerate of things, things like tree removal services that happen in the winter. We also have contracts for the golf carts to be stored. We don't have anywhere that can store those over the winter. Those get put in. It's the maintenance cost for those golf carts. It's the things along that nature. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, so that included in that also is testing of our on-site wastewater treatment plant right there. Per our new permit revised in 23, they required a bit more testing, so the cost of that is going up pretty significantly. And then just it's the addition of a lot of those small things, like some linen pickup, revenue pickup is actually quite big. We like to get our revenue off property and not store a lot of cash on the property, so the cost of that revenue pickup will end up well.
Per capita, I think golf, I see the most increases in line items in any other division. It's all little things. And I know the revenue's there, so I'm not even gonna go and complain about it, but I mean, it just was interesting to me that almost every line went up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's just because of what's happening historically. Since COVID hit, expenses have gone up because revenue's gone up and to maintain the course has. So each year we increase it a little bit to account for the change. We don't want to make it drastic and then have a bad year and now it doesn't look like we know what we're doing. So that's why I always say conservatively.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, moving on.
All right, so we'll flip over to the page 16, which is capital. There was only one change to this, and that is the line of the pickup trucks. Again, offset by golf revenues. But the reason for this coming in late is there was actually an accident that happened at one of the courses. A deer ran out over a vehicle, swerved the tree, totaled the vehicle. Employee is fine, but we do need to replace the vehicle, and that's why you see it in this change for 25.
A deer ran out, you said?
Correct.
Was the deer okay?
I can't speak for the deer, but
All right,
Ryan was all right.
all right, I'll read between the lines on that. All right,
And that is the only change, or that's the rest for golf.
Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the golf budget as presented by the county executive with no change. And then if I get a second, I would ask a brief question. Thank you.
Moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Gama. Supervisor Gearston, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chairman to the budget director, will we be reimbursed through WMIC for the vehicle?
That it should be.
So there,
If we submit a claim through EMC or property insurance, we're gonna be reimbursed.
Okay, have you submitted a claim?
yes. Yeah, so we actually have to decide between two decisions on whether EMC takes the vehicle and pays us for it, or we keep it and they pay us a different amount. So that is being decided yet currently, but there is a claim and it is probably more than what the vehicle.
Yeah,
So,
depending on the age of the vehicle, we might not get much.
thank you. Can I follow up on that?
You certainly can. You have
Thank
the
you.
floor.
So what you said wasn't clear about EMC. So the basic thing I'm having in my mind here is that we have a truck that's depreciated that was totaled, right?
Right.
And we're gonna get partially reimbursed for it,
Right.
but not fully reimbursed for it. We will be able to get a new one. So we'll be able to use the insurance proceeds to cover a significant portion of adding a new asset to the inventory.
Yeah, in a roundabout way, yeah. So the money will come in. What I've typically done with a lot of the damage claim ones is put it specifically into reimbursement for damages, something along those lines of a revenue line. So you would see that specifically come forward in one of the budget lines. And then being at the end of the year, golf has their own fund and own reserves. Anything profitable would roll over to that and then therefore offsets.
So what'll happen is can I continue think that what'll happen is, if we do get reimbursed, which we probably will, that'll show on the profit line.
Correct.
And we'll end up with a new truck.
Right.
Right. Okay. Anything else? So is it clear? Do I get it? what's happening.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know what the vehicle was on the books, but I know that the check amount, was in the double digit thousands. I don't know if it was 10 to 12,000,
Yeah.
reimbursed for it, which is more than what that vehicle is to us.
Sure.
And likely what we would get in auction or trade-in. So I guess in a way, it kind of works out to our benefit, but we won't say that being that the vehicle is scrapped.
Yeah, thank you. That makes it clear. So I yield.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Chair, I'd like to request a 2 to 3 minute break, recess. I need to speak to you about an important matter.
We'll take a 5-minute recess.
In regards to personnel overall, you do see a decrease. There's an increase to the salaries temporary, similar to golf, in order to, based on our historical data and the market values for hiring, we've increased this just to accommodate what the market dictates. But also, medical insurance and workers' comp have all decreased based on the county allocation. There has been turnover between directors and superintendent, which have also helped in the change for this. That would lower the personnel line. And we'll jump down to the contractual services. There's an increase of 20,000. Part of this is because of the data processing. I shouldn't say part. Data processing has other operating supplies used to hold the data processing, which is all of the credit card fees and everything that you see for the parks. We wanted to break that out, so it was better accounting, better tracking of, rather than having it buried within the other operating supplies. We changed it and created its own new line for the data processing. So that's why you see it broken out this way, and an increase to there, but also a slight decrease to the supplies. The miscellaneous contractual services has decreased based on department needs. And in regards to specifically,
God bless you.
The supplies and machinery and equipment and building maintenance supplies, this is decreased due to the current year expense timeframe. And what that means, with the recent turnover that we've had, not everything has been expended to the point of where you may normally, where you may normally see it. So in order to both be fiscally responsible for this year and help in levy reduction for the need for next year, we'll likely see proposals for carryover from this year into 2025. Wyatt has worked with his team to identify things that they need to get done this year, and then things that can wait, or things that just wouldn't line up with the time frame that they have left in the year, would carry over, and they'll utilize those funds next year. There's also in the fixed, there's a decrease in liability insurance. That's again just an allocation based off of the county, but there's an increase to building insurance and an increase to the Pringle Nature donation. This request came to us from Wyatt, from the Pringle Nature. And because it was so high, I wanted to sit down with them and have a talk of why we're seeing such an increase. Because if I have to present it, I want to know why they're increasing 20,000 off of a $46,000 line item. This is in part due to that federal regulation. They do have one or two salaried employees, which would that federal regulation of the new minimum would hit, as well as some of their program expenses. Now, I will say, we're talking with them, we're not just going to simply subsidize what you guys are doing. They have increased their rates to try and help create their own income and offset their own their needs, but based on what they've seen historically on where they had ended the year and where our numbers would be adjusted to fit their budget of breaking even, this is the increase that was proposed. I'll kind of pause there for any questions with operations.
Supervisor Kirby.
So Supervisor Gunn stole my thunder last time. What's in miscellaneous contractual services? What kind of expenses fall through
Yeah,
there?
so similar thing, tree removals, maintenance costs, annual testing. There is one specific line for a study of ADA assessment within the parks. Why add any more if I've missed any, but those are generally the big things. It also has snowmobile trails, which are the revenue offset, so
Okay.
24,000 of that is roughly offset with specifically revenue. Things of that nature.
Does it,
No, that's it.
does anybody know how much Pringle actually brings in revenue? Is there a line that breaks it up? Because I'm looking at this and I'm not really seeing. I mean, I'm wondering if there's more like, they could, maybe sign up with the school districts to get more field trips out there, or I don't know what, I don't know, you know, I've never dove into how
Yeah.
much use we get out of that and what revenue we generate from that, but
I spoke with them about expenses and revenue. I don't recall what the bottom line revenue was. I don't know if you have anything that might be able
No, I
to.
don't recall what the bottom line is either, but I can tell you that they are pretty heavily programmed. They do have also an annual, basically a membership that you can get so that you can do things like homeschool. So a lot of homeschool groups come through. A lot of folks throughout the pandemic took advantage of that and they're continuing to do it. So there's a lot of, those homeschool groups and a lot of school field trips do come through. So they've also been recently partnering with Boundless Adventures to do bundle deals and packages and special events and whatnot. So I did attend the most recent board meeting that they had, and they are getting pretty aggressive about how they're trying to handle the problem, at least from my perspective.
yeah, I mean, it's not a huge line item in what we're talking about, but it just have a question with that. So, I mean, maybe we can on a future finance agenda item, put that on there and maybe have a total update and review of that, what they're doing. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Supervisor Gama.
Thank you. Same question as during the golf section. I remember we have numbers about like 1 million something visitors last year. Is that okay?
1.5.
Yeah, and then do we have data regarding like where they're from, Kenosha County, other counties?
That's tough for us to determine because we're not signing people up for the first year or anything like that. We do have our license plate readers, but what I can tell you in terms of data is what we get from Silver Lake Beach, because that is one place where we do charge admission. So we check IDs for in-state or local residents and then out of state. And over there at Silver Lake Beach, it's a pretty even split, actually. A lot of folks come up from Illinois, specifically to that park, but that is the only place where we track any kind of data.
And then in terms of visitors, you know, how we do compared to the other counties in Wisconsin?
Well, the other counties, that'd be a good question. I don't know if I could answer that question.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
So we'll flip to page 18. There was a couple changes on this page in regards to the capital. The mobile stage, you last saw it at 225,000. Based on more recent quotes, that was dropped to 170. Parkland development was increased $125,771. This is very specifically ATC funds that were distributed to us. The original 1.3, for those who remember, was like a construction estimate of what that project was going to cost. That has since been finalized and trued up, and this is the remaining portion of it due to the county. And then we have added parkland development reserves to offset some of the Kemper building improvement by 123. And those are the changes, and that is parks.
Any questions on parks? Supervisor Noodle.
Building improvements for Kemper Center, 520,000. That is a.
Building improvements for Kemper 520, he's asking what that is.
That's primarily the exterior renovation, that 10-year plan that has been going on. I think we're in year 4 or 5 of that. I want to say roughly 350-ish thousand is set aside for that. And then the majority of the rest is the roofs. I want to say that there was somewhere around 100 to 150 put in for the roofs.
And just below that, 120,000, what's that, the reserves parkland?
Yeah, so that is using some of the parkland development funds that we have accumulated, taking from some of that pot and then reducing the bonding for the county.
For the 520?
Yeah, it would be a net of 400. So 520 expense, we're gonna offset it with some reserves that the county has, and it would be a net of 400.
Any other questions or comments? Supervisor Kirby.
So I noticed like with this Kemper shoreline restoration, that there's nothing planned out here, or do we have plans to look into that? Because that is definitely a concern as like Michigan encroaches on our shoreline.
It's definitely still ongoing. There's definitely still actively going for grants, pursuing different avenues that they can go. However, with such a large item for the bonding limit, in order to be able to balance out some of these other projects, if and when that project ever takes place, it'll be pushed in, but we don't want to just completely throw it off of our list as if we're not addressing it. So we keep it on the future projects just to show that it is on our horizon. It is something that we're looking into.
Supervisor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to note on that shoreline project, my recall is we exempted that from our self-imposed debt limit. Is that correct?
Be a legacy project, correct?
I can't hear, I'm sorry.
Yes, it'd be a legacy, considered a legacy project.
Right, so that is exempted, and it's good to remember that from year to year. So thank you, I yield.
Any other questions, comments? I really think we need to look at that sooner than later. I mean, I understand that we're trying to apply for grants, but we have to have a plan B if we don't get grants. I mean, it's coming, you know, I mean, the shoreline's coming. I'm very nervous about us not having anything in there, and I certainly can appreciate, you know, us wanting to get grants and get help and do that. But I mean, at some point, we're gonna have a conversation about what happens if we don't get the grants. What are we gonna do? So so that's on your radar, because it's on mine.
Yep.
Okay.
No, it's noted.
Okay. Anybody else? Supervisor
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the park budget as presented.
It's been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Nudo. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you.
All right. This brings us to the last division, for Public Works. Highway, page 19 on the packet, or 100 in the budget book. Before we get started, I do want to point out, as I pointed out in the Public Works Committee, we have a note here that says historical levy comparison. You'll see in 2015, it started around 2 million. Now, 10 years later, it's at around 831,000. This is kind of the forewarning that is likely to change, coming up in this future years. Why this has dropped so heavily in that period of time is because of those local transportation aids. $5 million is definitely not something that we're used to be seeing. It's heavily allocated to the cost of Highway S being thrown into some computations. Once that falls off, that reimbursement amount is likely to drop and therefore increase the levy. So this is just kind of the forewarning. We're picturing it 2-3-ish years out, but just a heads up for when we start to see these increase back up. And a big note of it, because this year, the reason why Public Works was able to have such a reduction in levy is mainly because of all the reductions that you'll see in highways. Part because of new revenue, but also part because of some of the reductions we've had, which we'll get into.
Just when I'm forewarned, I like to know exactly what I'm being warned about. So can you go into that again? What the local transportation aids and where it started? Paint that picture for me again.
Yeah, so I can't recall what it used to be years prior, but I know 2 years ago, we had taken this number as kind of a guess. We increased it so much and we hoped that the amount that the state would return back to us, because we don't get notified of that until like the very end of September, which is way past our budget time. We would take a guess at what it was, and 2 years ago, we were off by 500,000 positive, where we had this extra money and we could have lowered levy and all this other. Since then, we do attend meetings that DOT puts on, the CHEMS conferences. That's a system that the highway department uses. And it is a topic that comes up where people are trying to hone in on more what that calculation is. We've made our attempts and we've gotten pretty dang close. Last year, we were off by 60,000. This year, we're off by 100,000, but in comparison to the 5 million, it's a very small number. But that's made up of a whole bunch of different components. A lot of it is the third-party projects that we put into the roads. Highway S being such a large project in a short period of time ago. I think that it goes for 6 years, right? 6 years is the time frame that these numbers are based off of. Once Highway S falls off and that number now goes from how many ever millions of dollars and us maxing it out gets lowered, this local transportation aid number is likely to drop from 5 million into the 4 somewhere, and then us not having other revenue to offset it would increase levy.
But we're gonna address that when it comes.
Right.
Okay.
But just so when we come forward and there's a large increase, I just want people to be aware that it's not because it was anything that we weren't paying attention to, we weren't not doing it. It's just the nature of what's gonna happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
So personnel wise, there's proposed highway foreman of an E7 to highway supervisors at an 8. And play with that, the personnel has increased 110,000. This is because of salaries based off the annual raises as well as the medical expenses. Again, that's individual selections and the county allocations. But there is also some workers' comp decrease based on the county allocation. Other professional services, this is decreased based on department needs and every 2-year inspections. What we're trying to do is get a good gauge on some of these services that don't happen every year, but every 2 years. One in particular being bridge inspections, which comes out, I think, roughly around 20 grand a year. So that's why you're seeing a reduction this year, but you'll see an increase next year. Miscellaneous contractual services and other operating supplies, these are decreased based on historical data and department needs. The contractual services, since I know the question likely to come up, this includes pavement marking, the highway timekeeping system, and traffic cameras, maintenance costs and renewals, so things along those lines. The other operating supplies have decreased, and consequently other roadway supplies increased. These are kind of one and the same. They're very tied to the revenue or the invoicing that we do for the townships and the state. So if those go up, these accounts go up. If those are neutral or down based on what we're seeing just historically, we kind of adjust them accordingly. Fuel, we've decreased ever since COVID, when we were buying it at $1 a gallon, and then inflation when we were buying it at $4 or $5 a gallon. We obviously each year had to increase that budget, and now because it is down for the time being, we're decreasing that budget. Because of that being such a fluid expense line, we have taken into account 5-year averages of what the highway department is using, so we can kind of try and gauge this with some kind of backup detail for it. And that's what's presented in this budget. And then the salt level, salt we've decreased just based on our current levels being full, and then mild winters that we've had. We wouldn't expect to spend any this year. If need be, we do have the option to carry over some of that unspent expenditures if we do get hit with a very hard winter and need to buy more salt. For fixed increase in building insurance, but larger decrease in the liability insurance. In regards to some of the revenues, the biggest change here is the sale of county property. This is our Thielen royalty. We had an agreement that was passed back in 2020 for Thielen to mine materials at the pit. Because of COVID and some other things that happened, they didn't get to that until 2023, which is why in the budget book, I'm sure there might be a small line item for what we received that year. Yeah, 23 and 24 now going into 25, we want to be able to budget this in order to reduce levy, because it's very likely that we will be seeing royalty check coming in based off of what they're finding. Other than that, that's kind of operations spiel, so I'll hold there till we go to capital.
Questions on the operations? Okay, proceed.
Page 20. This is the highway equipment. What has changed from what you've last seen is the reduction of triaxle trucks. You last saw it at 285,000. It's been reduced to 140,000. This is because, as we kind of notated in that CIP meeting, where we would be able to see ourselves with build slots based off of the likelihood versus what we already have from prior year's budget. There is a decent possibility that we might be able to get 4 build slots. That would include the tandem axle that you see here and then 3 triaxles. We have money for about 2.5 triaxles currently, so this extra 140 would finish off that third and hopefully complete the 4 build slots that we potentially have. The other adjustment is pushing out excavators. Speaking with the superintendents and trying to be able to balance the CIP, we came to them trying to figure out what pieces of equipment were higher priority, and this is one that they identified that could push out a year. With that said, I do want to flip the page to page 21. This is an internal analysis that we do every year and update. This is based off of if we were to replace our equipment off of when it's quote unquote fully depreciated based off of the state's standards. It's not very realistic in regards to cost, and in 6 years, we can definitely get more use out of a truck in 6 years. But if we were to follow up with that, it would be $19 million in 25 to do. And then you can kind of see how that changes. It's an average of 3 million roughly per year. What we had presented was just a little over $1 million. We like to try and not go below $1 million and keep the life of the vehicles up, keep the cost of the maintenance down, things of that nature. And then we always throw in now at the bottom of this page what those pieces of equipment are, because before I worked in public works, I couldn't tell you half of them. So informational for everybody who's voting on this. Thank you for that. So I'll pause there before we go into the highway projects in case there's questions on the equipment.
Any questions?
So now on page 22, the only thing that has changed here is the infrastructure improvements number. It has gone slightly up. This is typically due to pretty much the rounding it down from this budget. It's one of the most fluid numbers. Increasing it, I think it came out to 18, 20-ish grand. Is never a bad thing. It could possibly allow us to pave more miles or do something more of that nature. So that is the only change that you see on this page. The next page is a tentative paving map. Obviously, things are had to change based on needs, but just for informational purposes, you have that. And the page isn't really related to highways, but public works in general. It's kind of our other miscellaneous budget line items. There's been zero change from 24 to 25. But that is everything there.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the highway and that miscellaneous account of the budgets as presented.
It's been moved by Supervisor Houston, second by Supervisor Nudo. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, James.
You guys got to do that.
I appreciate it.
I know, the fun's not even over. The fun's not even over.
And the sheriff's. Yeah. Ready for the
Former officers coming
I just visited a barber shop this afternoon. I was gonna go there. Business? 42.
Arnold's gonna read something to start with.
So the Judiciary and Law Committee approved a recommendation adjusting the sheriff's budget with increasing other professional services by 90,000, 5,209 line item, and the corresponding increase to federal inmate housing revenue of 445,801 line item of 90,000.
Okay,
All right,
you're up.
good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna give you our 25 budget presentation, highlights. We have a tax levy increase of 2.1% versus the 2024 adopted budget. Operating expenditures have an increase of 2%. That's $945,000. Estimated revenue increase of 1.5 or 139,000. Operating expenses, 25. Personnel, 1.4% increase. That is the Deputy Sheriff Association wage per their contract. That was a budget increase, 3.75%. That increase is on 12/29, 2024, and that can carry through December 31st of 25. We've added one administrative senior role, that's the digital evidence technician. And then to do that, we reclassified 3 positions. That entire cost of that reclass was $3,455. We have contractual service increase of 4.3%, $209,000. Our NAFCARE contract increased $206,000, and that includes offsite medical services. That's been the bulk of that, as we've discussed a couple times. Other professional services increase of $45,000. That aligns more with how we expect to end 24. We made cuts to building equipment maintenance, electronic monitoring services, and other contractual accounts. Those were reductions. In supplies, we have a 10% increase. The largest increase is going to be for our pharmaceuticals. The medications have increased astronomically. Machines and equipment offset by decrease in detention facility supplies, dishes and bedding, things like that. We're trying to make some officers' equipment, we're trying to make reductions where we can to offset those expenses. In capital expenses, we have a 7.3% decrease. It's $124,000. In our motor vehicles, we have a $225,000 decrease. Same number, we're purchasing 13 squads in 2025, and that number includes the upfit cost of all the equipment. Machinery equipment is a $101,000 increase, and we discussed quite a few times, it's the dryer and kitchen equipment for the detention center. Our next installment for the body camera contract. So that's an annual contract that continues. Revenue budget overall, we have a 1.5% increase. That is $139,000. We're estimating an increase in revenue we're hoping for our federal inmate housing. We increased from $70 a day to $105 a day, the per diem rate, and $37.43 to $47.95 for the transporting. But that number is a question mark, right? So we're hopeful. Alien inmate housing, that's a SCAP award, and this is kind of a unique one. We got $48,000 for the SCAP award from the federal government in 24. We don't have it's not an award, something to that effect, but we know what's coming. If undocumented individuals are in our custody, the federal government gives us a payment to help offset some of the correctional officer expense. And we don't have an answer for that. I don't know when that's coming or how much is coming. That's a formula that they have that we are not privy to. Also revenue from DOJ, we have a couple of drug enforcement grants. We have an anti-heroin grant and an anti-meth grant. And we are expecting a decrease, as you're well aware, the ARPA federal funds. That grant is going down to remaining funds, and our allocation for that 25 is significantly less than it has been in the past. So law enforcement due to the fiscal year 24 budget, assuming a third shift resource for Salem Lakes. So that was in our budget, but we are not going to realize that. They are not going to contract that third shift officer. So that money will not be coming. So we'll have to right size the budget in regard to that. So if anyone has any questions, be glad to start going.
I would like to start by thanking the chief deputy for having no trucks in this budget.
We don't need any trucks.
Okay, any questions? Supervisor Nudo.
Could you say it again, the two changes that there were made, please?
It's an increase to the other professional services expense line.
Hold on, where are we? What page?
That would be on 521900, so it would be on page 58.
Other professional services?
About halfway down the page here. So it's a recommendation to increase that 229,500 by 90,000. And the other half of that would be to increase the revenue line item on page 61.
That's 61.
Yep.
Okay.
Federal inmate housing, it's about halfway in the middle of the page, 445801 is the account number. That would be increasing the revenue from 2,025,000 and increasing that by 90,000.
So basically, we're increasing the revenue
Yes,
by 180,000.
increasing the revenue by 90,000 and increasing the expense by 90,000.
Oh, okay, okay, the first one was the expense.
Yes.
This maybe is for the sheriff. What are we getting for that 90,000?
First of all, that's just a recommendation. It's not even been adopted by us. So, I mean, that's not
I
in the
understand.
budget. Okay.
No, I understand, but I want to know. It's coming in front of us. We gotta make a decision tonight, right? You know, whether we want to that. So what is the 90,000 for?
From the JLIC meeting, the 90,000 was, well, you just discussed how it was brought in. That's for a mental health opportunity for the deputy sheriffs and for the staff, to see, a psychologist. A civil psychologist. So it takes the, that will cover the expense of that as well as the backfill for their position because they're gonna miss duty.
Why that was not put on with the original budget?
I'm sorry, Mr. New, I can't hear you.
Why it wasn't there with the budget that the county accepted?
Why didn't we bring it forward with the budget?
Right.
We thinned out that budget the best we could because we were under, obviously, very tight constraints to get that down as
So
far.
it's not like something that must be done right now.
Well, it's something we've been working on for a couple of years and something we'd like attention, in the future, for sure. It's important, but understand that we were trying to cut this thing down the best we could.
Sure. And the other question is by increasing by 90,000, where are we? The inmates were ready. What was it? Wait, last year we were on what? 1 million?
Last year's budget or
Yeah. Last year.
last year's budget was 1,450,000.
Yeah, for 50. And now we already went up to 2,025,000, but we're gonna increase another 90,000. I don't, is that feasible?
Is it feasible?
Yeah.
If the numbers went up, I mean, if there was a change in administration, but I'm saying if repeatedly, right? So I don't know,
Well, yeah, they get, yeah, which, it doesn't sound like fussy, sounds like they just, pumping the numbers up to make the budget, to balance the budget. I mean, if we really need it, I would not be against it, but I would definitely be against it. Increasing the revenue just to make the budget better.
Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the sheriff budget as approved as proposed by the county executive.
It's been moved by Supervisor Gearston, second by Supervisor Nuno to approve. Questions? Supervisor Kirby?
So I'm gonna
Professional service.
start with my favorite question. What is another professional services?
Okay, thank you for that question.
So what we have included in that line is we have some of our grant related expenses that flow through there. Which one of them is actually coming or came to an end September 30th. And then some other items we have in there, some of our emergency management grant expense. Some of our non-internal labor expense related to Country Thunder, which is a revenue line that you'll see also slightly increased going into 25. We also have our WCS contract, which is a vendor that manages our intoxicated drivers program that we've utilized for the last 20 years. And then we also have Lexipol, which is our law enforcement software that houses some of our policies.
So then, I also had a question, and Supervisor Noodle already mentioned the revenue line item for the, inmate housing or federal inmate housing. So part of my question is answered because we are increasing the per day from $70 to $104, but we're still going to be that we're budgeting double over where we're projecting to end 2024. And that still looks pretty optimistic, like the $1 million. So how are we bridging that gap?
So it's not only just the revenue increase per day, but it's also increasing the number of inmates. As the sheriff can allude to much more than I can, but those numbers have gone down.
The numbers haven't gone down. We talked about this last year where we were hopeful that they were going to increase, so that when the chief and the captain were making calls to some of our contacts at the federal government, this is the way it is right now across the board with all the different counties that are housing these federal inmates. The federal government is holding less people in custody right now.
Okay.
We're bringing them in for court, we transport them, we bring them for court, and they're getting bonds, they're leaving custody. That's just the situation right now, and I don't know what that's indicative of, because the federal marshal inmates that we house they're intense inmates, they're serious offenders. So I don't know why that's the case, it's never been the case before, but right now we are pretty much status quo with the rest of the other agencies.
Okay. So what do we think that is going to change? Do you think this is a one-off where we are just temporarily
I said
seeing a
it a couple
decrease?
minutes ago, and it's an if, like, sincerely, if there was a change in our government, those numbers I would anticipate would go up drastically quickly. But at this point, there's a if, I don't know.
Supervisor Kirby?
That's it?
Okay, yeah, I would rather err on the side of caution when you're budgeting for revenues than just, the surprise I would want is, oh, we got more revenue. Well, thank you, rather than we need to find more money. I'm sorry, anybody else on the committee before I go? All right. I want to talk a little bit about the body cam stuff. I remember, fighting the fight and getting it put in there, and the cloud talk and the expense talk. And if somebody could just give me an update on where we are with that, a general overview on, what it costs to maintain them, how much we have to, what the turnover is on the body cams. I believe that they're very useful, and I supported it then and I support them now. I just want to get a handle on what, if somebody could give me an overview of that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. I have a gentleman here who Sergeant Waldo is our equipment supervisor, and he's the one that deals with all the body cams. I don't have a number for you as to how much it costs to maintain them, but I can tell you that they are invaluable. We absolutely need them. We have been, the ones we're using now, we've been going through a update process where we're getting new equipment in and switching it out. That contract is, it's steady, and I think it's maybe our last year with this particular vendor, but, do you have ideas on the maintenance of it?
Sure. The body cams in general are amazing to have. They are very helpful for us, obviously. Probably protect us more than anything. Like you said, we're currently in the process of a refresh you know, our cameras, so about halfway through the contract is, here's all new stuff. So we're in the process of that right now. We just sent out the last of everything we have to refresh.
How often is that refreshed done?
Just once. So this one refresh will go to the end of our contract that's at 2026. So from here on out, whatever we have now is what we'll push through. However, if any of the cameras go bad, there's any malfunctions, anything wrong, something breaks, we just send it back to the company, they send us a payment. So that RMA process is pretty quick. Their support staff is very good. If you have a question, something not working right, you call them, email them, and they're pretty good with that.
Yeah, my question wasn't, whether or not we need body cams. I think we need them. I mean, I supported it no matter what the cost was because I think they are invaluable, but I'm just trying to, I'm not a technology guy. You know, my kid probably knows more about technology than me. But that's why I want to know what these contracts are with like the cloud and how often we have to cycle through them and just, you know, so you answered my question. I don't know if there's any other expenses I don't know about or.
It's all encompassing of that contract. So
Okay.
everything is built into the contract. It's all like the cloud storage, the refresh, the RMA, everything is built in. So we come up at the end of this year, at the end of 25 will be the end of that contract. So we have to start thinking, are we gonna stay with that vendor? Do we do another RFP? Technology changes, right? And we got a refresh at 36 months. That's what was written into our contract. So we're going to be in the exploratory phase this year to see what's going to be the future.
Okay, thank you. I know that we've talked many times over my 17 years about overtime, and I'm not going to dive too into depth in that. Okay, you're going to get me some information from other counties. That's where we left it, Chief Deputy.
I have that.
Okay. Okay. And I mean, based on my study and understanding and conversation with Patty, she kind of opened my eyes about a few things and where we're at. And I'm understanding it a little bit more each day. But I think we miss by about $1 million a year on the overtime. And it gets moved around and we get it covered and you know, everything's fine. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't have overtime or that we shouldn't, you know, these things happen. Overtime happens. I mean, we had a pile up on the interstate the other day. I mean, there's just things that happen that will drive overtime. So I'm not butting up against the sheriff's department on overtime. I'm just trying to understand if there's anything we're doing or if there's any cutting edge things that we can figure out to maybe try to reduce that is where I'm coming from with that. I expect no answer from you today, but I'll probably have the chief deputy come in and talk to us again on finance. Not because I want to badger or hound, but I want to see what there is that we can do. I mean, working together on it. So that's a little bit about my feeling about, I remember when I started 17 years ago, Supervisor Grady was on the overtime way back then. And I mean, every year I try to understand it and figure it out. And I think I now have a little bit more of a handle on it. So you guys should feel good about that. But, you know, I'm still going to want to know where we're at with that. Let's see if I have any other questions highlighted here. Increase in revenue. I mean, in this big budget, it doesn't. I'm good. Any other questions or comments? Supervisor Gama.
Thank you. I just want some clarification, a couple line items. So the salaries temporary, is that us contracting with other law enforcement agencies or private for help? That's ending in 500, 511.
Which is our shipment.
Thank you. What it is obviously, you know that I have a uniform deputy do a transport, you're paying full price for everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, these are gentlemen that are retired.
Yeah.
And so then they come work for us on a part-time basis and they at a substantial savings and we maintain their certifications as law enforcement officers and they're able to do all the same responsibilities. Transport.
I see. Okay. And another line item, conveyance, I believe it's pronounced, of prisoners. What is that?
That's exactly that.
The same thing?
It's the movement of prisoners all over the state. We have 2 trips a week that go to all these different state prisons. And then we have routes for Hicksville, so we get inmates all over the county to come.
Okay. Then my last question, I see there's 2 line items called mileage and travel, and below that one is mileage and travel tax. I'm wondering, what is that and why are they blank?
Oh, are they blank?
Yeah.
Mileage and travel is a lot of times, mileage and travel for conferences will get absorbed into the staff development line.
Okay.
Sometimes you may not have a line, it may not be detailed out because it becomes part of the full expense.
Okay.
It is taxable if there is meal reimbursement that is, I'm gonna say it wrong, but not overnight. If it's overnight stay, the meal reimbursement's not taxable, but if
Okay.
it's a not overnight stay, the meal reimbursement is taxable. So that's separated out to the reported under the two.
Gotcha. Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that, Commissioner.
Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, follow up your comment on overtime. Through the chair, do you have data when we take a look at overtime as to what percent the jailers occupy of the overtime figure?
It can absolutely be broken up 100%.
Do we have it divided?
I don't have it broken up.
It's my impression, just from past history, that just in the county situation, KCBC, pretrial down there, that's where the majority of the overtime, or at least a good portion, comes from. And it comes to the fact that it's a difficult job. It's hard to fill these positions. And therefore, the people that are in those positions have a certain amount of overtime to either volunteer for or to be mandatory. So there's a couple cause and effects here, but I think your comment, your question is good because you've looked at the underlying cause. You have to say, okay, what can we do to have more bodies, have more people available in the capacity of jailer? And is this an appropriate time? We want to hear from the chief deputy on the other counties and what they're doing. Is that part of what you're requesting this evening?
Well, I requested that at finance. I mean, I don't think we need to get into that here unless you have a question of him, certainly ask him.
But in the further analysis, let's take a look at what percentage the jailers occupy of the overtime quotient, and that'll give us a little bit more data to work with. That's my comment.
Okay. I also thought about maybe creating a bench with like hiring a couple people and having them available in like corrections to just work overtime. I mean, I would think we would have enough work for that. I don't know. I'm just shooting things at the wall, but you know, I mean, that's what I mean about a collaborative effort, about trying to work together to think about this. You're done, Supervisor Grady? Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Supervisor Gears.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that $90,000 item, we'll be considering budget language tomorrow. Is that correct?
No.
Or Thursday. And we possibly may wish to discuss budget language on that. So if we do, if the committee would like to do that, although it wouldn't amend any budget line item, I would request Clara to be available to discuss possible budget language in the resolution.
Yeah, we'll have, just to clarify what Supervisor Gearston is saying, we heard what you said, and we heard Supervisor Morrissey's request, and we are not against that. And I think that's something that we should certainly look into in the future. But I would rather have it planned out with your department and with finance and with, you know, even including some of the human services and mental health people. So I mean, there's a little more planning that we thought needed to be done with that. So I want you and your department to know that it's not falling on deaf ears. We're just rather looking at a budget resolution. So if Clara and if anybody from your department wants to come on Thursday, we will be considering a budget resolution to have us look at that next year.
Thank you.
It's not mandatory that you do, but I'm just throwing it out.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Supervisor Franco.
Will we be getting the language for the budget resolution in advance so we can review it?
The budget resolution is posted with the Thursday agenda online.
Oh, is
You can get to it now. It's the red line version.
Okay, it's posted online.
Okay, thank you.
We already took our vote. You can,
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you for your candor.
Sure. I think we need to adjourn. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Supervisor Kirby, seconded by Supervisor Geertz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Anybody want to stay? We're adjourned.